Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network with us now. And I was telling Mike in the break that it started off just talking about with that college athletics changing the way it has and football becoming a runaway train or one runaway leader of the train that Indiana has to stop pretending to care about football and actually show that they truly, truly do, that it has become so much so that even Kansas, who was probably the second worst football program and behind only Indiana or in front of only Indiana. But look at them now. They have an exciting brand of football to watch, scoring points, and anybody else. But you just have to have a competitive program there because it is changing. This engine is just becoming stronger. And I don't understand it because college basketball is a huge draw for all winter long up through the NCAA tournament, but football is the juggernaut that has become this the leader in some form or fashion. But in Indiana has continued to just stay where they are as a rock bottom program, and normally you at least see some circulature where, okay, you've got good and you stay up there. And Indiana had 2 decent seasons, but 2 decent seasons out of 7, not really cutting it. But they've never really put the effort to make them better than they are. I mean, people talk about, they filled the ends of the stadium in. Well, that's great, but that doesn't do a lot for the program itself. And you've got some thoughts on whether or not how much it'll affect, but I think that it's going, and this could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, but I could see a day where Indiana gets kicked aside if they continued down this same road.
Well, I think, these are 2 separate conversations, and one of them you are much more, you have much greater ability to discuss, because I don't know what Indiana has or hasn't done in football. I know that they had a nice team a few years ago with Michael Penix, and Michael left after he got hurt, and the injury, I think, changed the trajectory of Indiana football in ways that that led from Tom Allen being a well-paid coach to from that being his reality to being someone who's going to collect a nice buyout being his reality. I mean, I think if Michael doesn't get hurt that year, it changes everything. But it did. And I think that had an impact on what his ultimate decision was in terms of forwarding his career. And it led IU to the position that it is now. So I don't really know what they have done, but like 10 years ago, everybody said that there would be 4 super conferences and they would all have a dozen teams in it. And like symmetry like that doesn't work. That's not how college sports have ever worked. And honestly, in order to achieve that level of symmetry, whatever conferences exist would have to expose themselves to significant liability. And it's not worth it. If you're going to get the power scheming in some room saying, okay, you're going to have the West and you're going to have the South and we're going to have the Midwest and you're going to have the East or whatever. And that's how it's going to be carved up. Like, the people that get cut out of that are going to sue. And I just don't see that as being reality. Will football someday be operated differently than it is now? Yeah, I think it might. But, one of the interesting things was that not this past summer, but the summer before, I did a piece about who people wanted, not what person, but what sort of person people in college athletics wanted to be the next NCAA president before Charlie Baker was hired, and well before he was. And I talked to a lot of different people in college athletics to get an idea of what they were looking for. And in those conversations, the idea of FBS football becoming a separate entity came up so much that, and it was presented to me like we're rounding third and heading for home. And what I've always said is that the NCAA has a lot of different properties or qualities, I guess I should say, that make it valuable. And one of those is the idea of a liability shield. And that's always stopped them. Now, there's a case in court now about NIL money for those who didn't receive it before it became acceptable. I still don't understand how you go back and change the rules after the fact. I don't get that at all. I don't understand it. I was taught about ex post facto law when I was in high school, so I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand how you go back and change the rules now, but there's a significant liability factor in that. And if that wipes out the NCAA's treasury or whatever, if they lose that and they get hit hard by that, then at some point the liability shield concept no longer holds. But that's part of what's keeping football in the fold now. The idea that, you know, it's a really expensive sport to run, and it's a really expensive sport to insure. And there's that concept of, you know, we still have that idea of, are they employees or are they not? There's so many things that have to be resolved in that regard. That's the first component. And the second component of is this. Okay, Ohio State and Michigan played on Saturday. Fabulous game. Both teams came in at 11-0. That's what Michigan and Ohio State are used to. That's what their fans want. Well, how do you get to 11-0? Well, you have to have somebody to beat. So, like, do you think that the Ohio State and Alabama fans want to be in a league with Ohio State? With you know, do you think Ohio State wants to be in with Alabama and Ohio State and Michigan and Oklahoma and Texas and only those teams, so that they can all basically be the NFL and be, you know, 6-6? I don't think that's what college football fans at the biggest programs want. I think they want to be able to play teams that they are expected to beat. And they don't always beat them. I mean, we saw Ohio State lose to Purdue a few years ago. We saw them lose to Iowa a few years ago on the road. That it happens on occasion. But that's what college football fans are conditioned to feel. They want to go in on Saturday, have a good time before the game. They want to enjoy the game, and then they want to have a good time after the game. And it's not like that in the NFL. You go have a good time before the game, and then you're hanging by your fingernails for 3 hours. And then when it's over, maybe you're happy and maybe you're not. It's a totally different product and a totally different experience. And I just don't buy that college football fans are lining up to have that different experience. They have it on Sunday if they're NFL fans too. But right now, the fans of the biggest programs, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, SC when they're good. And that's, you know, they want to be those kinds of powers.
Yeah, I've never understood, first of all, how college football got to be so powerful, playing one time a week, when college basketball plays 7 days a week. Every day of the night, you could watch a college basketball game, and I generally am. So that is a sport that just controls every day almost, it seems, when it's going. And it has the greatest sporting event there is to me, the NCAA tournament, which is the greatest 3 weeks of the year. But yet football is considered this leader, which I don't get. They play once a week, and I don't. First of all, how is football considered so much bigger than college basketball? Because I don't get it.
Well, that all comes down to audience. The audience for college football, in terms of a specific event, is much larger than it is in college basketball. And there are many more telecasts of college basketball than there are of college football, probably by a factor of 3. maybe by a factor of 5, because you not only have more games per week, but you also have more teams that are saleable, so to speak. In college football, you've got a smaller package of teams. There's 130 Division I teams. There are 360 in men's basketball. And of the 130, there are maybe, I don't know, let's say 75 or 80 that are saleable in college basketball. That goes up to maybe 100 or a little more than 100. You add in some more conferences that are watchable, that people want to watch. And then they play more times a game. So there are many more telecasts, but they very rarely draw an audience. Now, this is regular season we're talking. That is enviable. They draw nice, reliable, steady audiences, and they are good for the networks that telecast them. But it's not what you get on a football Saturday. You don't get the 9 million people. I think that Fox is probably going to end up having 15 to 17 million people watched Ohio State, Michigan. That doesn't come in basketball except in the NCAA tournament. That you'll never get a regular season basketball game to draw that again. When Duke and Kentucky,
but don't you have when you add them up because they have so many?
Well, that's a factor, and that makes it valuable. It just doesn't make it as valuable. I saw somebody say on Twitter that probably 30% of the value in a conference contract is in men's basketball, and the other 70 would be in football. That seems to be about right. But because that 70 is where it is, I mean, 70% is a big chunk. You know, if you're a 2-income household and one person in the household earns 70% of the money and then gets an opportunity to go, let's say you're living in Indy and you get an offer to make even more, go to LA or whatever, I don't know, just using it as an example, you're going to go for the 70% person because the other person's only bringing in 30. So that's kind of how football versus men's basketball works.
Indiana, I said that they have not made the effort in football, and Mike says, define effort. Well, going out and trying to hire the absolute best coach that you can bring in. They did that for basketball. They went and got who they thought was the best coach. That did not happen for football. They went down the hallway when they had a change last time and paid the lowest salary that was being paid in Division I football. So that to me is not making an effort in that sport. And that's what I mean. If you were truly making an effort, you would do whatever it takes to try to bring in the best coach. And while I'm not saying you have to pay him $9 million a year and do something stupid like Michigan State did, but you've got to be in the range of what good coaches are making then, not at the start. And they got there with Tom Allen eventually, but he was still one of the lowest paid coaches. But that's what I mean by, boy, that's like they've done as little as possible to take little baby steps until they're forced to take another step.
I think one of the challenges there, Jim, though, is because of Indiana's tradition in football.
It's thereof.
That's a way to put it. It's a challenge to get the best coach, because if you're Ohio State and you're in a position when Ohio State had their opening after Tressel, Penn State had an opening around the same time. I mean, even Penn State couldn't get Urban Meyer because Ohio State was there. So there's a pecking order. Like Penn State's got, they have 2 national championships in my lifetime. They have 5 undefeated teams in my lifetime. That some of which did not, excuse me, actually 6, I think. No, 5. Some of which did not get accorded a national champion, but they had 5 undefeated teams, and even they couldn't get Urban Meyer because Ohio State was there. So you have to be inventive when you're hiring a coach for a program like Indiana. You have to find a guy that's really good, really smart. You have to take a risk. You can't just say, well, this guy, this person has been like Cincinnati in hiring Satterfield this last hiring season. I mean, it was the lowest risk hire you could do. He had been a competent Division I high major coach. But had he dazzled anybody? No, they were like building a nice car for him to drive wherever he wanted to go in Louisville. They were very eager to get him to leave so that they could hire Braun. And I'm talking about the fan base. I'm not talking about the institution. I'm talking about the fan base, because I used to do radio down there regularly and heard all the time how much they would love to see him move on. And so that's one way of doing it. But it's, what did Cincinnati get for that? They got a poor season. And what makes you inspired for the future? His past of being okay, pretty good. So you have to in Indiana's position, you have to be inventive and see the future. And the problem that you have is, this is what Purdue did when they hired Braun. They saw it and they hired it, and it worked. And then you lose it. In his case, because he wanted to go home, he kind of took a lateral move, or maybe even and this is no reflection on Indiana. It's just a reflection on the economics of the two conferences. You could say it's a half step down because of the Big Ten's television contract and the ACC's.
But an easier path to college football playoffs.
Say that again?
But it was an easier path to the college football playoffs because he was leaving the Big Ten conference, going to the ACC, which is not nearly as strong.
But that ease couldn't even keep the Pac-12 together. They just said, who cares? We want to be in a league that's making the big money. I mean, everybody in the Pac-12 had an easier path to the conference championship when there was one more automatic bid than there will be. It was theirs. And they still said, nah. So I think it more came down to the going home kind of thing. And that's why he did it. But the thing that Indiana has to offer now is that idea of, we're solid. We're good for like the decade. It's not going to happen in 5 years. Nobody's walking away from that money in 5 years. And so relax about that. I think that the conferences, as they're structured now, will last well into the next decade. But there's no way it's ending before this current television contract expires.